Today we're here to talk about the Rousseau CAD Library, which many of you may or may not be familiar with. Your trainer today is myself, Randy Pearden, one of the sales team members up here at Rousseau. As is common, we split today's subject matter up into three groups: accessing the CAD library, how to go and where it is, using the CAD blocks themselves, which I'm sure is the biggest question of the day, and the value of drawings, or at least our perceived value of drawings. So first up, accessing the CAD library. The CAD library, the deep CAD library as I like to call it, or comprehensive, is available in eRousseau under Sales Tools and Photos in CAD. If you don't currently have a CAD or an eRousseau login, please contact your sales representative or your customer service rep to get you one, because there's a lot of powerful tools inside of eRousseau that you may or may not know about. Specifically, in that Photos in CAD tool, you saw that first section was photos. We'll come back to that. But you've got two tabs, one for 2D CAD drawings and one for 3D CAD drawings, with files available for download. Here you can see the 3D. Now, what we recommend is once you've located the available libraries for download, you have a whole bunch of downloads possible, multiple in the 3D, but the one main file and two. To ensure efficiency of design, however, as somebody who does CAD myself, I would strongly recommend to download the library that aligns with the product and the type of CAD you're doing. For instance, if you're working exclusively in two-dimensional CAD, adding 3D CAD onto your desktop just complicates the search for the correct block and can take extra time for no value. Now, one question we get often, and I wanted to address right away, is 2D versus 3D. This is a big question. Recently, Rousseau launched the 3D CAD library. You just saw on the previous slide, this is now available for download. This gives all of our distribution partners the ability to create an isometric view drawing. The blocks look like what you see here, or if you have advanced capabilities, software, and skill, to use these to create a rendered 3D model. Now, this being said, 2D is the most popular choice. Front and top views are quite honestly simpler to create and do align with industry standards. Now, the choice between which library is yours, of course. But keep in mind, a three-dimensional drawing does take longer to create, and it may require additional software license or skill. Also, while you're in eRousseau, one of the most important tools that will help you efficiently do CAD drawings is the price tool. Now, we're going to dive into the block logic in the next section, but in the price tool, if you were looking for something like a proposal, the brochure alone, which we will refer to later, won't necessarily give you the quick way to find all the part numbers, but the price tool will. You can easily type in, say, an R cabinet proposal, R580G XYZ, and get the breakdown of components, allowing you to identify the correct part number of the block you're searching for, which we'll come to in a second. Photos also matter for two main reasons. It's right in the same tool as Photos in CAD and not by mistake. Photos will help you have inspiration when you're trying to come up with what you're drawing. Sometimes as a CAD operator or drawing person, you end up going back and forth and you're not quite sure what you're after. The Photos tool is there to help. But on top of that, sometimes it's also difficult for a customer to understand the 2D or 3D drawings as they would look in real life. And for this, the photo tool is also critical. Grabbing, say in the image here, an R-series cabinet, if you're designing an R-series cabinet, helps give a little bit of extra conception to what's being presented. Now, with no further ado, let's get into the meat and potatoes topic, using the CAD blocks. Now, right out of the gate, I want to say we strongly recommend that every drawing should begin with a hand sketch, even if the design is being communicated internally. The reason why is a hand sketch can quickly convey a client's needs, especially if the salesperson on site shows it to the customer, ensuring it is kind of what they're after. It also provides a clear visual guide for creating that CAD drawing when the CAD operator is going back and forth. Now, Relying solely on product descriptions, although it's possible, you can just use product descriptions. The reality is all of us are visual people, especially CAD people. So making that initial step can avoid confusion and streamline that design process. Now the block library itself, which is really what I want to get into. You can see here an example on the right. After downloading the block library, you'll find a comprehensive directory of products organized very effectively by category, product line, and componentry. The library is designed for easy block identification. So we recommend leaving it in its structure. So when you download that folder, place it somewhere safe, leave it in the structure it's designed at, because that will work with the catalog, that'll work with the Rousseau. When you look to find a block, there's a drilling down into the directory that has to happen. And this is quite often where people get confused where to find the block. So when you're navigating, as here you can see, this is in the 2D library. First, you select your product series, so SH or SR in the example. Then the product type, SR10 means post, and you'll notice some X's next to it. That's because the last is the dimension. The dimension is only reflective once you've gone into the block itself, or in the directory itself to find that block. Now, some products may go deeper than 3 layers, depending on how it's organized. But generally, this is going to be the standard format. And the dimensions in 2-dimensional, worth note, are only going to reflect the 2 dimensions of viewpoint. So that means no depth, whereas a 3D block will show depth. Now, the logic and why it's RA30 in the picture here, 35, 45, etc., is the block files are only containing a master block, not a proposal. So if you were to look for an assembled cabinet, quite honestly, you're very unlikely to find it in the library. One of the benefits and sometimes the challenges with Rousseau as a brand is the incredible flexibility and modularity of the system. That means you have to understand the block logic to find the correct part. Blocks are organized by the first 4-digit product code, as you can see though. So RA30 in Rousseau language means a housing. So you could select a housing by drilling into that block. A drawer or RF31 would operate the same way. Now there are a few models available, which we often would refer to as a typical or something easy to use, but we'll come to that in a minute. Typicals, aside from the ones we pre-populated, are critical to efficient designer process. Now, when working frequently in CAD, and I'm sure if a lot of the CAD people are on the call today, you know, you've got a master file somewhere with a whole bunch of drawings on it that you can simply copy and paste. We call these typicals. These are saving assemblies, basically, of something you've built that you plan to build again. So in the example on the left here, if this was a shelving typical, it is far more efficient to save this on a large file. And then when the customer or the sketch comes in for this exact unit, except one 8-inch drawer instead of 2 4-inch drawers on the top, the CAD drawer can efficiently copy it from the master file, paste it into the new file, and change the one element instead of rebuilding the entire thing. Now, typicals have a couple of other purposes as well. One main one that sticks out, and we're going to refer to it in the protection segment, is providing a standard drawing instead of an exact drawing. Sometimes, for many reasons, the customer doesn't necessarily need to see the exact thing they're going to get. A typical may be enough depending on the reason or rationale. Now, the general brochure is the other incredibly important tool to use when you're doing your CAD drawing. And why should somehow be obvious now that we've shown you the directory. The component pages should be the go-to place to find the product you're after if you're not using eRousseau to look up some proposal. So as an example, you can see here in the image, various images of an R series housing, an RA30. Using your catalog, you would locate the correct part number or prefix, say RA30, and the other parts you may need. Let's say it needed leveling glides, RA74. You could then use that information to find it easily in the directory. There's a couple of other important things to note about the Rousseau blocks themselves. Interactions between blocks, because of the way Rousseau blocks are created, may not snap the way you would prefer, snap being a term in Autodesk to mean they connect to each other. The reason why is the Rousseau CAD files are really built as a block model, if you were, and the snap locations may not be exactly where you want them. Now, a clever CAD person may draw a line or explode. We'll come to explode in a second, but it's worth noting that you may have to adjust or alter the block to get it to go to the exact position you'd like it to be in. For me personally, exploding is my go-to for this. Now, the reason why I explode, for those who know CAD well, is they're not a grouped block. They're really a save file. So ungroup doesn't do anything to a Rousseau CAD block. You do have to explode the block. Now, in Autodesk, that's done by typing explode enter, but it depends on the software, with all softwares having some mechanism to do that. Now, the explode is not down to the micro layer. The blocks themselves were built in layers. So when you explode once on the image you see, you would then be able to adjust the location, position, and wording on the dimensions, the drawers, and the posts. If you were to select a drawer, however, the drawer maintains its integrity. You can select and move the whole drawer. If you were to type or click on the drawer again and press explode again, that's when you break the block integrity. Many of the Rousseau blocks will have 2 or more layers that can be exploded. That brings up the matter of custom blocks. Even though the library is very comprehensive, sometimes you need a block that just doesn't exist. This happens. When you need a block that doesn't exist, that doesn't mean as an Autodesk drawer that you have to stop. You can create the block out of thin air, basically. But it's important to stick to Rousseau's dimensional logic, which we cover in a lot of other training. For instance, imaged here on the right side, we've got a 48-inch wide shelving unit. For whatever reason, we're going to assume the 42-inch wide shelving unit doesn't exist. So to create the 48 to the 42, we can apply the dimensional logic and scale. So we've moved a post 6 inches to the left, where you can see with the double post. After we've moved that post, we can measure 42 inches center to center, which matches Rousseau's 6-inch incrementality. And then we can scale the shelf to fit, assured that there's a shelf that fits that size because it does fit that dimensional logic. Now, I will make the note, always confirm if the created block dimensions are possible with your CSR. Sometimes there's an odd block here and there that's too small or too big for the dimensional logic, but generally, it's a great way to create that custom block. It's also worth noting, especially for those of us who mostly sit behind the computer, not everything works together. Now, this isn't necessarily about CAD specifically, but as a good CAD designer, you know whatever is drawn will eventually be assembled, and not all products can be assembled as they're drawn. Here on the right side, you can see an R-series cabinet housing, and right beside it, you can see a shelving unit, but there's no clearance between that cabinet and that shelving unit. Now in Autodesk, of course, I can draw it like that. I can put no clearance and have a very tight tolerance on where I want that to sit. However, it can't be installed like that. There's a foot plate that goes onto the bottom of the post that interferes with the moving of it that close. And the physical shelving unit, I would have to have a couple of people shove it as tight as they can, and hopefully the floor is level just to get close to this. So it's important to be practical when you're creating drawings and considering how will the install crew do what I'm recommending that they do. Also in the drawing, it's worth noting that some things are shown and some things are not. So here you can see it's a surface level drawing, but not depth, of course, because it's 2-dimensional. In this 2D example, you can see there's power channels, finishing panels, and overhead cabinets. What you can't see is RD44 posts or upper brackets because they would be behind this facade. Now, if this was in 3 dimensions, maybe you would see the RD44 post as it would appear at the end of one side or the other. However, that being said, you still wouldn't necessarily use the block for the upper or lower bracket. The reason I mention this is I want to make it clear that it's important to use Autodesk blocks for visual reference, not a bill of material. Rousseau blocks are not built to be a bill of material. The bill of material would be done on our side. Now, isometrics, for those who don't have 2D or those who don't need to spend a lot of time on 3D, is of course available and isn't going anywhere. If your company does create a drawing in 3D, you may need isometric drawings from us, so that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But for those who do 2D, of course, you can't build a 3D, meaning you have to ask us, which is okay. However, I would propose in many cases, simple 2D is likely to be enough, and it's great for customers to get that visualization. So if you have the capability to draw that 2D, present it first and see if the customer is okay with that, rather than investing a lot of internal resources on your end to develop a three-dimensional drawing. Now, as a side note on that, if you do request a 3D isometric drawing from Rousseau, please remember not all of Rousseau staff have an Autodesk license, so these requests should be in 2 dimensions. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the cost of Autodesk. Ultimately, the decision to purchase and maintain a license is yours. 2D licenses for the Autodesk products, however, cost several $100s a year, while 3D licenses run into the thousands. And although drawings do add to a proposal, which we'll cover next, they do also require trained staff, specialized skills, and time, which means they're a long-term investment, not a casual purchase for a single project. If you were looking to procure a software or wanted to know the differences between the two types, there's 2 streams of software. There's vector and polygon. Autodesk is a vector-based software. Now, what vector means basically is it's drawn on mathematical planes, meaning it's precise, and when you zoom in and out, you don't lose resolution. Polygon software, products like SketchUp, rely on an image file, meaning that although a CAD block is compatible and these blocks can be used there, the integration is challenging and less precise. Now we'll finish up on the value of drawings. So the first question up is why drawings? Drawings matter. Rousseau, like a lot of products in the storage industry, is designed to address a challenge. And it's created by you, the expert, because the customer is not necessarily the expert. That's why they called us. Because of this, it can be difficult for a customer to fully visualize a design, making the drawing by far the most effective way to present your solution. Also, the quality of the presentation can enhance the customer's confidence in the professionalism and capability your company possesses. Speed also matters. As mentioned, we can provide an isometric view of a design. There's no problem with that, but it takes time. And if your company has in-house drawing capabilities, 2D drawings are often done same day. Since your team works directly with the customer, the questions are also easier to answer than waiting for Rousseau to come back with a list of questions based on request. So consider handling basic drawings internally to speed up your customer service and get there first, while reaching out to Rousseau for more complex demands. It's also worth noting, drawing make numbers pop. So this is almost a reiteration of what I said, but when presenting a quotation, including drawings as part of the package visually represents the solution clearly and easily to the customer. Often we tend to lean on descriptions, but descriptions are still hard to visualize no matter who is reading it. And when the design is tailored to the customer's needs, it's unlikely they can find it online as well, reinforcing the customization and value. Now there's a dark side of drawings, which I'm sure many on the call today have seen. People share drawings, unfortunately. What we recommend is protecting your work somehow, watermarking the drawings with your brand or name, including clear terms on your quotes or emails that forbid the use of your drawings for other bidders. And in the worst case scenario, simply think about either only providing typicals or pictures to customers that are repeat offenders of sending out your work to get quoted. Drawings also may require specifications. I said at the start of today, there's 2 specifications attached. They look very similar to this image. When submitting a drawing package, especially with governments, you may have to do a spec package. So consider incorporating details from Rousseau's spec sheets, such as steel gauge or a couple unique features subtly to exclude alternative brands. Now, I'm not going to pretend that's easy to do. crafting specs is a practice skill, but when you're when you're good at it and you do it often, it prevents customers from bidding the same project. Last up today, and by no means the least, consider not drawing. Not everything requires an Autodesk drawing. My Model R is still fairly new in the marketplace, but it's effective, it's rapid, it's in color, and it does a good job of showing what the configuration can look like. Multiple configurations can also be generated in a single session with a complete parts breakdown ready to go in the price tool. So I'll always say, do you need to draw before spending that time?